Shadows that stalk. Stories of Ostratumba, darkness follows. What happens when death is not the end, but the beginning of an endless nightmare? In the heart of Montreal, where colonial history is intertwined with urban legends, there is a house that has witnessed horrors that transcend time. The residence on St. Dominique Street, a Victorian stone and wood-style building restored in 2022, seems to be the dream come true for any family that seeks roots in a city rich in culture. But under its impeccable plaster walls and polished oak floors beat a dark secret, the psychic connection between a murderer and his victim, a bond so powerful that even death failed to break it. The house was built in 1895 by a French industrialist, Émile Rousseau, whose fortune was based on skins trade. However, after his death in 1912, the place passed to a series of owners who died in suspicious circumstances, inexplicable suicides, violent domestic accidents and, in one case, a man found with his hands torn, as if he had tried to excavate his own tomb. The neighbors nicknamed La Maison du Diable and avoided it for decades. In 2018, a group of investors bought it to renew it, believing that modernity could erase its past. But in 2023, when the Beaumont, a high middle-class family, moved there, hell woke up. The Beaumont were a seemingly normal family: Etienne, an architect obsessed with sustainable design; Camille, a literature professor with an academic interest in the Gothic, and his children, Leah, 14, and Thomas, 9. Everyone had dreams for the house: a vertical garden, a personal library, a safe space to raise their children. But from the first day, something was wrong. The lights blinked for no reason. The doors closed alone. And in the basement, an echo of steps resonated, as if someone walks on their heads, even though no one had climbed. The house was not only alive, I was obsessed. The history of the property is intertwined with two key figures: Victor Lucier, a serial killer who operated in Montreal between 1947 and 1953, and Marie Tremblay, his last victim. Lucier, a 38-year-old butcher with a history of psychopathic violence, kidnapped and tortured at least 6 women before being arrested. According to police records, he confessed to having killed Marie-Eve in the house of St. Dominique Street, where he buried her in the basement. But his body was never found. In his trial, Lucier said that the young woman possessed him, that his spirit followed him and whispered orders to kill. They declared him crazy and executed in 1954. However, modern researchers have discovered that Lucier and Marie-Eve shared a supernatural link, a collective trauma. Both had been abandoned in childhood and raised in the same orphanage, the Institut des Enfants Oubliés, where they suffered physical and emotional abuses. There, according to historical documents, an exorcist priest performed satanic rituals with problematic children, seeking to release their demons. Something went wrong. A failed ritual created a psychic connection between Victor and Marie-Eve, an invisible rope that united them even after death. When the Beaumont began to experience inexplicable phenomena, they looked for answers. Camille, fascinated by Gothic, investigated the past of the house and found references to the Lucier case in digital files. Etienne, skeptical, attributed events to electrical problems or the imagination of her children. But when Thomas began to speak in ancient French, a dialect that nobody in the family knew, and Leah suffered night panic attacks where he shouted, "He is killing her again," they understood that something else was at stake. The house not only housed spirits, it was a distorted mirror of human traumas. Each corner reflected a wound. The main bedroom, where Lucier strangled Marie-Eve, was filled with a cold in summer. The bathroom, where he tried to drown her, dripped blood without apparent source. And the basement, where he buried her, vibrated with a constant buzz, like the beat of a giant heart. The spirits did not want to rest. They wanted to repeat. Victor Lucier and Marie Tremblay were trapped in a cycle of possession and violence. His psychic connection had mutated in a separate entity, a force that a family needed to continue his work. The Beaumont, with their own emotional cracks, the tension between Etienne and Camille for the economic pressure, Leah's anxiety to fit into school, the isolation of Thomas, were the perfect breeding ground. The story of Darkness Follows is not only on ghosts, but about how unresolved pain can even corrupt the most sacred. The house is a symbol, a sick body that needs healing. But how to cure something that has been feeding on fear? Through interviews with local historians, judicial records and testimonies of elderly neighbors who remember the rumors about the house, this book reconstructs the events that took the Beaumont to the edge of madness. Each chapter unravels one more layer in history, from the initial investigation to a spiritualist session that released something worse than the original spirits. But there are also unanswered questions. Why Marie-Eve, a victim, seems to help Victor in her plan? Is there an older force than the two, a third spirit that manipulates events? Can the family escape, or are they condemned to become part of the history of the house? Darkness Follows is a trip to the limits of reason, where the past and present collide, and where family love is proven by a darkness that does not understand moralities. This is not a book for those looking for simple answers. It is a broken mirror that invites us to ask ourselves, what shadows we have inside that they could destroy us. January 2023. Montreal, Canada. The Beaumont arrived at the house for an icy Tuesday, with the leading sky-threatening snow. Etienne, dressed in a wool coat and leather gloves, inspected the gray stone facade covered with ice. Perfect, he murmured, although his voice trembled to see the windows of the second floor, which seemed to observe it. Camille, hugging Thomas to keep him hot, he noticed a strange smell, a mixture of moisture and iron, as rusty blood. Are you sure this is the address? Asked. Etienne reviewed the purchase contract. Yes, the renewal company said everything is ready. Leia, behind them, looked up and felt a chill. In a third-floor window, a diffuse figure seemed to move. When he blinked, he disappeared. Inside, the house was a maze of contradictions. The walls, painted white and beige, contrasted with the dark wood soil, which creaks like bones when walking. The main hall had a 5-meter roof with a glass candlestick that seemed too large for space. Camille pointed out a crack at the ceiling base. Is that new? No, Etienne replied. They say it is part of the vintage style. During the first weeks, the incidents were subtle. The basement door opened alone, revealing a ladder that descended to the dark. A wall watch in the dining room stopped exactly at 3:07 a.m., when, according to historical records, Victor Lucier killed his first victim. Thomas was the first to see something. One night, while looking for his favorite stuffed animal, he heard children's laughs in the hall. When he opened the door, he saw a girl with black hair and white dress, who smiled before disappearing. An imaginary friend? Camille asked. No, Thomas insisted. She said Victor is looking for her. The first violent event occurred on February 17. Etienne was in the attic, checking old plans of the house, when the carebro of the room collapsed, crashing to centimeters where Camille had been sitting. The police attributed it to a structural ruling, but a technician from the renewal company murmured, "This type of cables do not break like this. Someone cut them." That night, Camille found Leia in his room, with her eyes blank and muttering in ancient French, "Il voit. Il veut. He sees me. He loves me." Who? Camille asked, terrified. Leia did not respond. The connection with the past intensified. Camille investigated in the municipal library and discovered that Victor Lucier had lived in the house. The newspapers of the time called him, the Butcher of Montreal, a man who kept parts of his victims in an industrial freezer. But what caught his attention was a note outside in a police newspaper. Lucier said that the last victim, Marie Tremblay, possessed it. He said that his screams guided him, that he was not the murderer, but the instrument. How could a victim control his executioner? On March 14, an event changed everything. Etienne decided to clean the basement, which smelled of wet and sulfur land. When moving a box, he discovered a springboard on the floor, covered with cobwebs. Under it, he found a hidden room, with brick walls and a partial skeleton in a corner. Next to the skeleton, a newspaper stained with blood, that of Marie. The pages were written in a trembling letter. Victor is not the only guilty. Father Leclerc united us. He made us one. He lives in me, and I in him. The house is our body. Nobody will escape. Etienne closed the newspaper, but it was too late. On the upper floor, Camille listened to a blow. When he went down, he found Thomas standing in front of the open trap, with cloudy eyes and a voice that was not his. Welcome home. The spirits had chosen Thomas as a new guest. Lucier and Tremblay's psychic connection not only survived, he fed on new victims. The house was not a home, but an organism that needed families to perpetuate its cycle. The Beaumont had two options, fleeing or facing the truth that lay under their feet. But in the doable maison, even the truth has claws. The Bloody Legacy of Montreal. Discover how the satanic rituals of the Institute of Forgotten Children forged the connection between Victor and Marie-Eve, and why the house continues to claim souls. 1947. Institute of Forgotten Children, Montreal. The snow fell into thick flakes on the stone roof of the Institut des Enfants Oubliés, a dark and elongated building that raised as a monument to abandonment. Founded in 1882 by a religious congregation, the institute had been a shelter for orphans, children of prostitutes or families too poor to maintain them. But in the decades before its closure in 1955, the place became a hell disguised as charity. Children were treated as cattle. They slept in iron beds without mattresses, ate watery soup and received disobedience. But behind the cracked plaster walls, something worse happened. Night rituals led by Father Henri Leclerc, an exorcist priest with a sickly obsession for releasing demons. Leclerc believed that the most problematic children, which with violent, liars or self-destructive tendencies, were possessed by evil spirits. His solution was brutal, a series of improvised exorcisms that mixed Catholic liturgy, apocryphal texts and pagan practices. According to documents found in 1998 during the demolition of the Institute, these rituals included forced fasting, sensory insulation and, in some cases, the ingestion of hallucinogenic infusions made with local plants such as Baleño and Mandragora. Victor Lussier and Marie Tremblay arrived at the Institute in 1938, both with 5 years. Victor, son of a soldier fallen in World War I and a mother who abandoned him at the door of the church, showed a disturbing cold since childhood. I did not cry, did not laugh and observe others with empty eyes. Marie-Eve, on the other hand, was a brilliant girl, with an overflowing imagination she used to escape her reality. But both shared trauma. They had been touched by darkness long before they met. The beginning of the link. In 1941, when they were 8 years old, Victor and Marie were selected for a spiritual experiment by Father Leclerc. According to handwritten notes found in the basement of the Institute, the priest believed that joining 2 tortured souls could create a purification channel, a body where demons will manifest and could be expelled. The ceremony took place in an underground room without windows, with brick walls and an impromptu altar made of rotten wood. Victor and Marie-Eve were tied to 2 chairs, with the dolls linked by a rope soaked in holy water. Leclerc, dressed in a black robe and an inverted crucifix, recited fragments of the Romanum ritual, the official exorcism manual, along with invocations to unknown entities. The demons inhabit the pain, he murmured as he poured red wine on his heads. Only pain can expel them. For hours, the children were shouted, blows and endless questions about their sins. Victor remained silent, but Marie cried and begged mercy. In the end, Leclerc declared that the ritual had failed. The demons do not leave. They stay, and they grow. The birth of the entity. The sequelae of the ritual marked both forever. Victor developed an extreme aversion to human contact, but also a morbid fascination for the suffering of others. He began to mutilate animals in the backyard of the Institute, keeping the parts in jars that label with names of saints. Marie-Eve, meanwhile, began talking in dreams, describing scenes of violence that he had never witnessed. The caregivers separated them, fearing that they corrupt each other. But something had changed. Victor and Marie-Eve were no longer 2 people, but a duality. When one was angry, the other cried. When one slept, the other had identical nightmares. The doctors of the Institute attributed it to psychotic disorders induced by trauma, but the confidential records suggested another theory. The ritual did not purify them. He merged them. They now share a single spirit, divided between light and dark. In 1945, both escaped from the Institute. Victor disappeared in the streets of Montreal, working as a butcher and perfecting his ability to hide his madness. Marie-Eve was adopted by a middle-class family, but her new life was brief. In 1947, at age 14, she was kidnapped by Victor, who took her to the house on St. Dominique Street. The house as a witness. The residence on St. Dominique Street was not randomly chosen. Victor, now adult, remembered to have seen her as a child during a school excursion. It seemed a place where no one would hear the screams. For 3 weeks, he kept Marie locked in the basement, feeding her with pieces of raw meat and forcing her to repeat unintelligible sentences. According to the testimonies of neighbors who suspected something, Victor went out to buy provisions and returned with bloody bags, although he insisted that they were for the business. On April 14, 1947, Marie-Eve died. There are no official records of his death, but subsequent police reports mention that Victor confessed to having strangled her after she told her that he didn't want to be him. But here the contradiction arises. Why did Victor insisted that Marie-Eve was still alive? Who controlled him from death? In his trial, Lussier said that, when he died, Marie did not free himself, but that his spirit merged with his, creating a hybrid entity that needed new victims to survive. She whispered with me orders, he said during his statement. He told me who to kill, how to do it. I was just his tool. Psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, but one of them, Dr. Émile Fournier, wrote in his personal report, I am not sure that Lussier is lying. I have seen patients with dissociative identity disorders, but this is different. It is as if 2 people had shared a single consciousness, even after death. The house is prison. After the execution of Victor in 1954, the house passed to a series of owners who died in inexplicable circumstances. But historical records suggest that the connection between Victor and Marie-Eve did not break. In 1962, a paranormal researcher, Jacques Moreau, documented phenomena in the house. Voices of children in the basement, singing songs in ancient French. Blood that appeared on the walls, forming words like, "I never went," a phrase that Camille Beaumont would see decades later. A female figure seen on the third floor, with a white dress and black hair, which disappeared as he approached. Moreau concluded that the house was not a place, but a body, inhabited by the entity of Victor and Marie. "The house is its jail and its temple," he wrote. "They need new souls to keep her alive." The arrival of the Beaumont. When the Beaumont signed the purchase contract in 2023, they did not know that they were accepting a contract with something older than the property itself. The house chose them for one reason: their own emotional cracks made them vulnerable. Etienne, obsessed with controlling the physical space, ignored the alarm signs because she believed she could tame the house with technology and design. Camille, fascinated by Gothic, was looking for a story to tell, but did not expect the story to choose her. Leia, fighting with social pressure, was susceptible to the influence of Marie-Eve, who seemed to empathize with her anxiety. And Thomas, the youngest, was the weak link. His mind still not formed was made by a perfect container for the shared entity. The possession of Thomas was not an accident. It was a repetition of the ritual of the Institute of Forgotten Children, a way to recreate the original connection. The house needed a new link, a new duality, to continue its cycle. What happened to the third spirit? In the introduction, a crucial question was raised: is there an older force than Victor and Marie-Eve, a third spirit that manipulates events? The clues are in the details. The smell of iron that the Beaumont felt upon entering, the buzz in the basement that does not correspond to any electric source, and the phrase, "I never went," which seems written by someone who is not Marie-Eve. In the archives of the Institute of Forgotten Children, there is a reference to a third child involved in the 1941 ritual. A boy named Lucien Dufresne, 10, who died during the ceremony. According to Leclerc's notes, Lucien was the first to receive the spirit, but his body could not contain it. He died with his eyes open and a smile that did not disappear or after his death. Some researchers believe that Lucien did not really die, but merged with the energy of the ritual, becoming a guardian of the connection between Victor and Marie-Eve. His spirit, or what remains of him, could be behind the current events, making sure the cycle continues. The cycle that does not end. The house is not just a place of death, it is a psychic organism that feeds on unresolved traumas. Each family that becomes part of the ritual, a piece that must be sacrificed to keep the connection alive. The Beaumont are trapped in this cycle, but they still have an opportunity. Understand the past to break it. If they can discover the truth about Lucien Dufresne and the true purpose of the Leclerc ritual, maybe they can free Victor and Marie-Eve. Or condemn forever. The Pact of the Dead. Explore the failed ritual of Father Leclerc, the death of Lucien Dufresne, and how the spirits of the three children merged to create an entity that still looks for new victims. 1941. Institute of Forgotten Children, Montreal. The underground room smelled of moisture and fear. Black candles knocked on iron candlesticks, projecting shadows that danced as living creatures. Father Henri Leclerc, dressed in a broken robe and an inverted rosary, watched the three children tied to the wooden chairs. Victor Lucier, 8, remained motionless, with his eyes fixed on the ground. Marie-Eve Tremblay, also 8, trembled, her lips moving in a silent prayer. And among them, Lucien Dufresne, 10, looked at the roof with a smile that did not seem to belong to him. Lucien had been chosen by accident. Originally, Leclerc planned a ritual of 2 children, but an administrative error included it in the list. He was a quiet boy, with blonde hair and pale skin, who rarely spoke and never cried. Institute caregivers considered him strange, although no one knew why. Some said that events could predict before they occurred, others, that his eyes changed color when he was angry. Leclerc, however, saw something else in Lucien, an empty container, ready to be filled. The failed ritual. Father Leclerc began the ceremony with an invocation in Latin. Veni, tenebrae. Come, shadows. Receive these children as offerings. That their souls are purified by pain. Victor and Marie were tied with ropes soaked in holy water, while Lucien remained free, sitting in front of them. Leclerc gave him an oxidized silver dagger and ordered him, cut the cord that unites them. Free us from their pollution. Lucien did not respond. Instead, he took the dagger and cut his palm. The blood dripped on Victor and Marie-Eve's feet, forming a reddish circle on the stone floor. Then, the room changed. The candles went out, and a sound like giant wings filled the space. Victor felt a heat on his chest, as if he were growing inside him. Marie-Eve shouted, not pain, but horror. She saw her own face reflected in Lucien's eyes. Leclerc tried to stop the ritual, but it was late. Lucien stood up, his voice echoing with a multiple echo. It's not me. I'm the bridge. Suddenly, Lucien fell to the ground, convulsing. His body twisted as if something was starting it from the inside. Marie's screams mixed with laughter of Victor, who did not understand why he laughed. When Leclerc reviewed it, Lucien was dead. But his smile remained, even after doctors confirmed his death. The truth about Lucien. The Institute archives do not mention Lucien Dufresne in any official report. However, in 1998, during the demolition of the building, a newspaper hidden in a false wall was found. He belonged to a nurse named Marguerite Lavoie, who wrote, "Lucien was not a common child. He arrived at the Institute without documents, without past. He said that his mother abandoned him because he was no longer human." No one believed it, but now I think he was right. The ritual did not kill him. He released him. The newspaper reveals that Lucien had been possessed since he was 5 years old by an unknown entity, a force that fed on the connection between damaged souls. His presence in the ritual was no coincidence, it was the necessary catalyst to merge Victor and Marie-Eve in a single shared consciousness. When Lucien died, his spirit did not leave. On the other hand, he joined the connection between Victor and Marie, becoming a third eye, an entity that watched and manipulated the link. The shared entity. After the ritual, Victor and Marie-Eve developed a symbiotic relationship. When Victor committed his first murders in 1947, Marie-Eve, still alive, felt the pain of the victims as if he were his. "But I couldn't stop it, the connection was irreversible." In his newspaper, Marie-Eve wrote, "Victor is not himself. Something else guides him. Sometimes, I hear voices that I don't recognize. One of them sounds like Lucien, but he can't be. He is dead." Police found the newspaper after Marie-Eve's murder, but ignored it as the delirium of a traumatized victim. However, forensic records show something disturbing. Wounds in Marie-Eve's body did not match Victor's statements. Some were too precise, as if they had been made by someone with medical experience. Other details, such as the victim's finger's position, forming a symbol of the Catholic Church, suggested a ritualistic intention outside Victor. The house as a body. The house on St. Dominique Street was not only chosen by Victor for its isolation. According to the historical maps of Montreal, the land where it is located was an indigenous cemetery in the 18th century, a sacred place where local tribes buried their shamans. When the French settlers built the house in 1895, they not only destroyed the graves, but also aroused something that slept under the earth. The spirits of the shamans, offended by desecration, joined the entity created by Victor, Marie and Lucien. The house became a psychic organism, a body where the three consciences and the ancestral force coexisted. The neighbors of the time reported strange phenomena, lights in the windows that moved alone, voices of children singing songs in a language that nobody recognized, a burnt smell that appeared without apparent source. In 1912, a local priest tried to bless the house, but fled terrified. "There are no demons here," he said. "Only hunger." The arrival of the Beaumont. When the Beaumont moved in 2023, the house reactivated its cycle. But this time, the presence of Thomas, the youngest son, altered balance. Thomas was not only possessed by Victor and Marie, he also felt Lucien's influence. The voice he heard in the basement was not from Victor, but from Lucien, who whispered, "Don't fear. We just want you to understand." Camille, when investigating in the municipal library, found references to Lucien in a journalistic article in 1941. A 10-year-old boy disappears from the Institute of Forgotten Children. Caregivers deny knowing their whereabouts. But in an attached file, an anonymous testimony said, "Lucien did not disappear. He stayed. Now he lives on the walls." The true purpose of the ritual. The ritual of Father Leclerc was not a failed exorcism. It was an experiment to create an immortal entity, a shared consciousness that could transcend death. Leclerc, obsessed with the idea of beating the devil, believed that merged souls could create a being capable of resisting sin. But something went wrong. The entity not only survived, he became hungry. "I needed new victims to stay, new families to repeat the cycle." The Beaumont were not the first. In 1962, Jacques Moreau, the paranormal researcher, documented a similar case. A family called Dupont moved to the house in 1959. The youngest son, Pierre, 7 years, began speaking in ancient French and drawing strange symbols. In 1961, the family disappeared. Their bodies were never found, but the words appeared on the walls of the basement, "I never left." Moreau concluded that the house not only caught souls, he reinvented them, merging them with the entity to perpetuate their existence. The battle for Thomas. Thomas, possessed by Victor and Marie, began to show contradictory behaviors. A moment was the usual sweet child, the next, his eyes darkened and spoke in a guttural voice that was not his. "He wants to go out," he told Camille one night. "He says he needs more bodies." Camille, terrified, confronted Etienne. "What if it's not just Victor and Marie-Eve? What if there is someone else?" Someone who controls them too. Etienne, skeptic, tried to rationalize it. He is just a scared child. He needs psychological help. But when Thomas began to draw Lucien, a blonde boy with a fixed smile, Camille knew they were facing something bigger. The truth is that they don't want to see. The house is not just a prison for Victor and Marie. It is a psychic laboratory, a place where the entity created by Leclerc proves new ways of existing. Every family that enters is an experiment. Can the cycle break, or will they become part of it? The Beaumont are at a crossroads. If they flee, the entity will continue looking for new victims. If they stay, they could become the next link in the chain. But there is a third option: face Lucien. According to records, Lucien was not a villain. He was a child used as a tool, a bull that now seeks to escape as much as they. If the Beaumont can communicate with him, maybe they can break the connection that the entity keeps alive. The broken mirror. Discover how an ancient mirror in the attic reveals visions of the past and how Lucien tries to warn the Beaumont about the true purpose of the house. March 2023. Casa Beaumont, Montreal. The snow had given way to a cold rain that hit the windows as if something tried to enter. Camille Beaumont climbed into the attic with a folding ladder, carrying a candle in one hand and Marie's newspaper in the other. Since Thomas had been possessed, the house seemed more alive. The walls whispered, the lights blinked in sequences impossible to ignore, and the air smelled of iron and moisture. But that night, Camille followed a track that couldn't miss. On a page of the Maria Diario, written with trembling lyrics, I had found a phrase that had not noticed before. The mirror knows everything. If you look, it will show you who you are. But be careful. You don't always lie when you see you. A mirror? Camille recalled that, during the initial inspection of the house, Etienne had mentioned an old mirror in the attic, covered with dust and too large to move it. No one had paid attention, but now, he climbed the last steps and opened the attic door. The air was dense, as if it were loaded with static electricity. In front of her, in a dark corner, the mirror was waiting for her. The mirror that should not exist. The frame was carved wood, with symbols that Camille did not recognize, intertwined circles, inverted crosses, and what seemed to be an open eye in the center. The glass, although opaque for dust, shone with an internal glow, as if something behind him were watching. Camille cleaned the surface with his sweater sleeve. At the first touch, the mirror emitted an acute sound, like the squeak of an agonizing rat. The candle in his hand went out. Then, he saw something to move. It was not his reflection. It was Victor Lucier, standing in a dark room, with blood in his hands. His mouth moved, but did not emit sound. Behind him, a female figure, no doubt Marie, was kneeling, with his eyes closed and lips moving in a silent prayer. The image changed. Now it was Lucien Dufresne, standing in front of a stone wall, smiling with that fixed smile that had terrified the caregivers of the Institute. His voice echoed in the head of Camille, clear and cold. I am not the guardian. I am the door. And you are opening. Camille backed away, but the mirror attracted her like a magnet. His reflection appeared, but it was not her. It was a younger version, with black hair and empty eyes, the same expression he had seen in Marie's photos. What are you? Asked Camille out loud. The mirror responded with a word. True. The visions that should not be seen. Camille went down to look for Etienne and the children, but the house had changed. The doors closed alone, the halls lengthened, and the stairs seemed to take to different places every time I stepped on them. Finally, he found Etienne in the kitchen, checking electrical cables. We have to talk, he said, in a trembling voice. Etienne looked at her, noticing fear in her eyes. What happens now? The mirror. It's not just a mirror. Show things. Images of the past. Of Victor, from Marie-Eve, even from Lucien. Etienne frowned. Lucien? Who is Lucien? Camille told him everything. The ritual of the Institute of Forgotten Children, the death of Lucien, the theory that his spirit had merged with Victor and Marie to create a psychic entity. If the mirror can show the past, maybe we can understand how to stop this, Camille said. Or maybe we go crazy, Etienne replied. But it was Leia who convinced them. I saw him too, he said, with a low voice. What did you see? Asked Camille. Leia trembled. Me. But it wasn't me. It was someone else. Someone who wanted to hurt. The mirror test. They decided to try the mirror together. They went up to the attic, with Thomas clinging to the hand of Camille. The child had been silent since his possession, but now muttering unintelligible words. When they stood in front of the mirror, he reacted immediately. The images flowed as a distorted movie. The Ritual of the Institute, 1941. Lucien cutting the palm, Victor and Marie-Eve united by the blood, Leclerc screaming in Latin while Lucien's body convulsed. The Murder of Marie-Eve, 1947. Victor strangling her in the main bedroom, her eyes open in a moment of understanding, as if she had understood that she could not escape. The DuPont family, 1961, Pierre, the youngest son, drawing symbols on the basement walls while his parents shouted, the word, I never went, appearing in blood. But then, the mirror showed something new. An unknown figure, dressed in a dark robe, standing in the basement of the house. He was not Victor, or Marie-Eve, or Lucien. It was someone else. Lucien's voice echoed in his minds. He is the true owner. He who made us like this. The truth about the mirror. The mirror was not just an object, it was a psychic portal, a tool created by Father Leclerc during the 1941 ritual. According to the records found in the Marie-Eve Diario, Leclerc had obtained the mirror of a collector of artifacts hidden in Paris, who warned him, this mirror does not show the world. It shows the soul. Use only for the worthy. But Leclerc was not worthy. He used the mirror to purify the children, believing that he would reveal their internal demons. Instead, the mirror absorbed the souls of Victor, Marie and Lucien, merging them into an entity that now inhabited the house. The mirror not only showed the past, he showed the present and the future, depending on who looked at him. For Camille, he revealed his connection with Marie, for Leah, his deepest fears. And for Thomas looked at the mirror and saw Lucien. He speaks to me, said the child, in a monotonous voice. What says? Asked Camille. Thomas closed his eyes. He says the house is not a home. It is a prison, and that the mirror is the only way to escape. The desperate plan. Etienne, still skeptical, proposed to destroy the mirror. If it's the source of everything, breaking it could free us. But Camille was not sure. And if we release something worse? Leah, in a firm voice, said, we have to ask Lucien. He knows how to finish this. They decided to do a test. Camille wrote a note and placed it in front of the mirror. How do we break the cycle? They waited. Minutes later, the mirror replied. Not with words, but with an image. One hand breaking the mirror, while Victor, Marie and Lucien figures disappeared in a cloud of light. But there was a warning. Under the image, a phrase appeared, the truth has a price. Prepare to pay it. The decision. The family argued for hours. Breaking the mirror could release them, but also awaken the entity that controlled it. If the mirror was the door, as Lucien had said, what was on the other side? Thomas, in a soft voice, said, I think Lucien wants to help us. He says he no longer wants to be here. Camille felt a chill. How do we know it's not Victor playing with us? Because Lucien never lies, Thomas replied. Etienne, resigned, took a hammer. If we're going to do this, let's do it now. But when he raised the hammer, the mirror emitted a deafening sound. The ceiling lights blinked, and a different voice from the others resonated in the room. No, do not break the door. Open it. The voice was not from Victor, or Marie, or Lucien. It was the voice of the true owner of the house. The prohibited room. Discover who is the true owner of the house, what is behind the sealed door of the basement, and how the mirror was not the only tool of Father Leclerc to control the entity. March 2023. Casa Beaumont, Montreal. The sound of the mirror resonated in the attic like a drowned cry. The voice, deep and guttural, was not of Victor, or Marie-Eve, not even Lucien. It was something older, darker. Camille felt the air thickened, as if the house was inhaling. Who are you? He asked, his voice trembling. The answer came in a collective whisper, as if thousands of voices spoke at the same time. I am the first. I am the guardian. I am the one who never left. Etienne, still holding the hammer, backed up. This is not normal. We have to get out of here. But Thomas, with cloudy eyes, approached the mirror. His voice was not his. He's right. The true owner is down. In the forbidden room. The sealed door. Since the Beaumont moved home, they had ignored a door in the basement. It was not in the original plans, and the contractors who renewed the property said they had never seen it. Etienne tried to open it once, but was sealed with rusty chains and a lock so old that it seemed impossible to break. Now, with Thomas speaking as if it were another person, Camille knew they had to go there. They went down to the basement with a hand staircase, a hand lamp and Marie's newspaper. The air was colder than ever, and the stone was wet, as if someone had spilled water recently. In front of them, the door waited. The chains were intact, but the lock was open. Who opened it? Asked Leah, clinging to his mother's sleeve. No one, Etienne replied, in a hoarse voice. They pushed the door. He creaked, but opened without resistance. The underground passage. What they found was not a room, but a passage. A stone staircase descended towards the dark, with brick walls covered with symbols engraved with something that looked dry. The walls oozed moisture, and the smell of mold was so strong that Camille had to cover his nose. Thomas was the first to go down. He awaits us, he said, with that voice that was not his. The others followed him, one by one. At the end of the ladder, the passage opened to a circular room, with a vaulted roof and a stone altar in the center. On the walls, there were drawings of human figures united by strings, with empty eyes and open mouths and silent screams. And on the ground, a circle of human bones. The legacy of Father Leclerc. Camille recognized some of the symbols. They were the same as he had seen in the mirror. But there were other older ones which I could not identify. This is a place of worship, Etienne murmured. Leia pointed out an oxidized metal plate on the wall with a Latin inscription, Hara habitat veritas, hic nascitur tenebrae, here the truth lives. Darkness is born here. Camille translated out loud. What does it mean? Asked Etienne. It means that this place is not only a ritual. It is the origin. Thomas walked to the altar. His hands trembled, but his expression was quiet. Leclerc came here, he said. How do you know? Asked Camille. Because he left everything ready. The mirror, the house, us. The true story of Leclerc. Historical records said that Father Henri Leclerc died in 1952, 3 years before Victor Lucier was executed. But in the Marie Diario, Camille found an entry that contradicted that story. Leclerc did not leave. He stayed. He said his body was just a bowl. That when he died, his soul would live in the house. That he would continue working to free demons. It can't be, said Etienne. But it's true, Camille replied. Thomas's voice echoed strongly. Leclerc is not dead. It is here, in us, at home. Suddenly, the altar emitted a sound, such as the beat of a giant heart. The walls vibrated, and the figures drawn in them seemed to move. A voice, the same they had heard in the mirror, filled the room. Yes, I am here, and you are my new instruments. The Renaissance ritual. Thomas fell to his knees, grabbing his head. His body twisted, and his voice changed. He wants to use us. As Victor used. As he used Marie. Camille ran towards him, but Etienne stopped her. Don't touch him. It is not him. Leia, terrified, said the circle of bones. Some of them shone with a sickly green light. What are they? Asked. Camille, with an accelerated heart, replied. They are remains of the children's children. Of those who disappeared. Suddenly, the bones moved. They rose from the ground, forming humanoid figures that began to dance in circles around the altar. Leclerc's voice echoed. You are chosen. You are the new ritual. The battle for Thomas. Thomas shouted, his body convulsing. His eyes turned white, and his mouth opened in a scream that did not seem human. Help me, he supplied, with his own voice. Camille hugged him, but he shook with supernatural force. He's taking me, said Thomas, with tears in his eyes. Lucien appeared, not physically, but as a light figure in the corner of the room. His smile was not, and his eyes were sad. Don't let you control you, he said to Thomas. Asked the child. The mirror rules. Only he can stop him. Camille recalled the mirror warning. The truth is a price. Prepare to pay it. Thomas, you have to trust us, Camille said. Conferia in Lucien, Leia added. Thomas nodded. He got up and ran towards the exit of the passage, shouting, Come on, we have to return to the mirror. The flight. The figures made of bones persecuted them, their clumsy but persistent movements. The walls of the passage began to close, as if the house tried to catch them. They ran down the stone staircase, climbing as fast as they could. Behind them, Leclerc's voice roared, You will not escape. You are part of me. When they arrived at the attic, Thomas took Etienne's hammer. Fast, Camille shouted. Thomas lifted the hammer and crashed into the mirror. The explosion was blinding. A flash of white light filled the room, followed by a sound like that of a storm. The windows broke, and the roof trembled. And then, silence. The end of the cycle. The mirror was broken. The fragments shone on the ground, reflecting not their faces, but images of the past. Victor, Marie, Lucien, and Leclerc. But now, everyone looked with peace. Lucien appeared one last time, smiling as before. Thank you, he said. Are you finished? Asked Leia. Lucien nodded. The house is no longer her prison. Now is your rest. Thomas, exhausted, sat on the ground. I don't listen to him. Camille hugged him. We are safe. But Etienne, looking out the broken window, asked, And the house? What will happen to her? The answer came in the form of a soft breeze, like a sigh. The house exhaled. The truth that was left. A week later, the Beaumont left the house. They could not sell it. No real estate agent wanted to touch her. But they couldn't burn it either. When they tried to call the police, the calls did not connect. The house is still there. Empty. Silent. But in the basement, under the dust, there is a new inscription on the passage wall. The truth is price. We pay it. That nobody else does. And in the broken mirror, if you look carefully, you can see 3 figures smiling in the distance. Victor, Marie-Eve, Lucien, and behind them, a darker shadow. Still breathing. La Séance del Hell. Discover what happens when a paranormal researcher returns home decades later, believing that he can control the entity, and how the broken mirror reveals again secrets that no one should know. October 2043. Casa Beaumont, Montreal. 30 years after the Beaumont flee from the house, the building was still standing, abandoned and covered with black ivy. The snow of the previous winter had left an ice mantle in the windows, and the roof showed cracks that threatened to collapse. But for Dr. Elise Moreau, a paranormal researcher and descendant of Jacques Moreau, the historian who documented the 1962 events, the house was a unique opportunity. Prove that the entity that lived there not only existed, but could be controlled. Elise, 38, was a recognized figure in the world of the supernatural. His career was based on studying classic cases of possessions and psychic entities, but his personal motivation was deeper. His grandfather, Jacques Moreau, had died in 1999 under suspicious circumstances, leaving an incomplete newspaper with notes on the house of St. Dominique Street. In the last pages, he wrote, "I failed to free them. I only enraged them. The house is not a place. It is a contract, and someone, someday, will break it, or renew it." Elise arrived at the scene with a team of 4 people: Sophie Duval, professional medium with trance skills; Marcus Bell, spectral technology expert, equipped with infrared cameras and electromagnetic field sensors; Daniel Choquet, historian specialized in religious and occult rituals; Lucas Roy, Elise assistant and his only link with the outside. The house that does not forget. When crossing the main door, the frozen air hit its faces. The interior was in ruins. The tapestry paper came off, the wooden floor creaked as fractured bones, and the smell of moisture was so intense that it irritated the nostrils. "It's worse than I imagined," Marcus said, adjusting his camera. "But it's intact," Elise replied, pointing to the broken mirror in the attic. The mirror, although fragmented, was still in its frame. The glass pieces reflected distorted images, shadows that moved, faces that should not be there. Sophie, seeing it, paled. "Something is watching us," he murmured. "Of course," said Daniel, reviewing Jacques Moreau's diary. "The house not only remembers. He claims. Preparations for la séance." Elise decided to perform a séance in the basement, where the circle of bones and the stone altar still remained. They used black candles, salt, and a voice recorder to capture any phenomenon. Sophie sat in the center, with her eyes closed and her hands on a wooden table. "Are you ready?" asked Elise. "No, but we must do it," Sophie replied. Elise began, "On behalf of the living and the dead, we invoke the entities that inhabit this place. Victor Lucier, Marie Tremblay, Lucien Dufresne. Are they here?" A cold wind entered through the broken windows, turning off the candles. The entity responds. Sophie opened her eyes. They were not his, they were completely white. His voice changed, echoing with a multiple echo. "We are not them. We are all. We are the truth that they didn't want to see." Marcus, recording, noticed that the thermometer dropped to -15 degrees Celsius in seconds. Daniel backed away, muttering a Latin prayer. "Who are you?" asked Elise, in a firm voice. "I am the one left. He who does not leave. He who will never leave." Sophie fell to the ground, convulsing. When he recovered, he cried. "It wasn't one. There were thousands. Voices, shouting in my head." Daniel reviewed the recorder. Sophie's voice had not been the only one in the recording. There were others, whispering in ancient French. "I never left." Elise's failed ritual. Elise, determined to dominate the entity, used an object found in the Jacques newspaper, an obsidian amulet with Leclerc ritual symbols. He placed it in the center of the bone circle and ordered, "If you're real, show yourself." The answer was immediate. The basement walls were filled with cracks, and the ground trembled. A high and thin figure appeared in the corner, with a dark robe and a face without defined features. Leclerc's voice echoed, "You are not worthy. You come like others. To ask, to fear, to die." Lucas, the assistant, tried to flee, but the basement door closed with a dry blow. "Abe the door," Marcus shouted. "Can't," Lucas replied. The figure approached Sophie, who fell on her knees. His voice changed again. "I know you, girl. You also carry the pain. We will use you." Sophie shouted, and her body arched back, as if something was possessing it. The return of the mirror. Marcus, desperate, took a piece of the broken mirror. When touching it, he saw visions. Victor strangling Marie-Eve, but with Lucien's eyes. Leclerc performing the ritual, saying, "They are not two. There are three, and the third is the master." The Beaumont breaking the mirror, but with an unknown figure smiling in the distance. The mirror was not the end. Marcus shouted. "What do you mean?" asked Elise. The entity did not break. It was divided. The figure in the corner laughed, a guttural laugh that vibrated the bones. "Yes, we divide. In you. In this house. In everything." The battle for Sophie. Sophie, possessed, got up and walked to Elise. His lips moved with a voice that was not his. "Did you want to control us? Now you are part of us." Elise backed away, but Sophie grabbed her arm. An intense pain crossed his body, and saw flashes of his own past. His grandfather, Jacques, writing the newspaper, with tears in his eyes. An unknown girl, Lucien, smiling from a mirror. A door sealed in the institute, with the phrase, What enters does not come out. Subcessit, Daniel shouted, throwing salt on Sophie. The possession ceased, but Sophie collapsed, unconscious. The truth about Leclerc. Daniel, reviewing Jacques' newspaper, found an entry that had not noticed before. Leclerc was not human. It was a container. His body was taken by something older, something that used children to create an entity that could live forever. The house is not their home. It is his body. Marcus, pointing to the altar, said, "Look at this." On the ground, the circle of bones shone with a sickly green light. Humanoid figures began to form, as in the original ritual. "We have to go out," Lucas shouted. The final flight. The team ran towards the exit, but the underground passage closed behind them. The house caught them, as he had done with the previous families. Sophie, recovering, took a piece of the mirror and threw it against the altar. The impact caused an explosion of white light, and the bone figures disintegrated. "He found it," Marcus shouted, but Leclerc, or what was left of him, appeared one last time. "You will not escape. You will return. You all come back." The light disappeared, and the house was silent. The four survived, but none was the same. Sophie lost the ability to speak. Marcus left his career and retired to a monastery. Daniel published a book that nobody believed. And Elise returned to the research institute, but in his final notes he wrote, "We failed to break the cycle. We just extend it. The house continues to claim. And I feel his voice in my dreams." A year later, Elise disappeared. His body was never found, but on his computer, a last audio file was discovered. "I am part of them now. The house is not a place. It's a promise. And I fulfilled it." And in the broken mirror, if you look carefully, you can see a new figure in the shadows. The cry in the basement. Discover what happens when a group of teenagers decides to explore the abandoned house in 2063, believing that it is only an urban myth, and how the broken mirror reveals again secrets that nobody should know. October 2063. Casa Beaumont, Montreal. The house was still there, like a body petrified by time. 35 years after the disappearance of Elise Moreau, its walls were still covered with black ivy, broken windows and partially collapsed roof. But for Alex Vignault, 17, it was just one more urban myth. La Maison du Diable. A place where the ghosts of a murderer and his victim attracted the curious to kill them. Alex and his friends, Noemi, 16, Malik, 18, and Clara, 17, had grown up listening to stories about the house. At school, teachers warned that no one who entered was unharmed. But for teenagers, it was an opportunity to record an urban exploration video for TikTok, win millions of views and prove that they were not afraid. They arrived at sunset, with GoPro cameras, flashlights and a bottle of cheap wine to break the ice. Alex, with his leather jacket and leader attitude, was the first to cross the broken door. "Are you afraid?" he asked, laughing. "Only there are spiders," Noemi replied, adjusting his backpack. They did not know that the house had already chosen them. The house that does not forget. Inside, the air smelled of mold and iron. The wooden floor creaked under his feet, and the walls were covered with graffiti made by generations of intruders. In the main hall, a fallen candlestick blocked part of the road, and on the roof, an eye-shaped crack seemed to observe them. Clara, the most skeptical of the group, said an oxidized sign on the wall, "Don't pass. The truth is a price." "How do you think this is a montage?" asked. But Malik, checking his phone, noticed something strange. "There is no sign, nor GPS. It is as if we were trapped." Alex ignored it and climbed into the attic, where he found the broken mirror. The fragments shone with a sickly green light, and in one of them, he saw his reflection, but it wasn't him. He was a child with blonde hair and a fixed smile. "Who are you?" he asked aloud. The answer came in the form of an acute cry that resonated from the basement. The cry that should not exist. The sound was unmistakable. A cry of woman, acute and desperate, as if someone was being killed. But it didn't come from any specific place, it seemed to get out of the walls, from the ground, from the air itself. "Did they write that?" asked Noemi, pale. "It's just the wind," Alex said, although his voice trembled. They decided to go down to the basement to investigate. The door was open, despite the fact that historical records said it had been sealed after the disappearance of Elise Moreau. When they went down, they found the stone altar, the circle of bones and the humanoid figures drawn on the walls. But something had changed. The circle of bones shone with a green light, and in the center, there was a new piece. A bone of a human skull, with a Latin inscription, "I never went." Clara approached, fascinated. "This is real artifact. It could be worth a fortune." But when it touched it, the ground trembled. The entity awakens. A cold wind invaded the basement, turning off the flashlights. The walls vibrated, and the scream was repeated, this time closer. "Let's get out of here," Malik shouted, but the basement door closed with a dry blow. Alex, still holding his camera, focused the broken mirror. In one of the fragments, he saw Lucien Dufresne, smiling with that smile that never disappeared. His voice echoed in Alex's mind. You are not the first. You will not be the last. The house is always hungry. Noemi, terrified, said the circle of bones. Humanoid figures began to move, rising from the ground as puppets controlled by invisible threads. They are skeletons, shouted Clara. One of them threw himself towards Malik, who dodged him for seconds. We have to break the circle, said Alex, remembering Jacques Moreau's newspaper he had read years ago. The battle for Clara. Clear, still holding the bone with registration, he began to convulse. His eyes turned white, and his voice changed. Why do you come back? Didn't you learn? It was the voice of Marie-Eve Tremblay, but mixed with others. Victor Lucier, Lucien Dufresne, Elise Moreau, and something else. Clear, wake up, Name shouted, grabbing his arm. But Clara pushed her with a superhuman force. We are not ghosts. We are the house. And you are our new guests. Alex, desperate, took Clara's bone and threw it against the altar. The impact caused an explosion of white light and the bone figures disintegrated. The truth about the mirror. The light revealed something that adolescents did not expect, a hidden door on the basement wall, with a symbol of the eye they had seen on the roof. What's that? Asked Malik. Daniel Choquet, the historian who had participated in the expedition of Elise Moreau, had left a note in his book published in 2044. Under the altar, there is a door. Do not open it. It is the heart of the house. It is where darkness is born. But Alex, impulsive, opened it. Behind, there was a small room, with brick walls and an intact mirror. On its surface, images of the past were reflected. Victor strangling Marie-Eve, Lucien smiling, Elise Moreau disappearing. And finally, Alex and his friends, standing in front of the door. This is not real, Clara murmured, with his normal voice. But the mirror replied, the truth has a price. Prepare to pay it. The final flight. The house began to collapse. The walls cracked and the basement ceiling collapsed. The teenagers ran to the exit, but the underground passage closed behind them. Clara, still affected by possession, took a piece of the broken mirror and threw it against the hidden door. The impact caused another explosion of light, and Leclerc's voice resonated for the last time. You will not escape. You will return. You all come back. The light disappeared, and the house was silent. Epilogue. The truth that was left. The four survived, but none was the same. Clara lost the ability to speak for weeks. Noemi developed night panic attacks. Malik stopped using technology, fearing that the cameras spied it. And Alex returned to school, but in his notebooks, he wrote, we failed to break the cycle. We just extend it. The house continues to claim. And I feel his voice in my dreams. A year later, Alex disappeared. His body was never found, but on his computer, a last audio file was discovered. I am part of them now. The house is not a place. It's a promise. And I fulfilled it. And in the broken mirror, if you look carefully, you can see a new figure in the shadows. Alex Vignault, smiling, The Trail of Madness. Discover what happens when an investigative journalist decides to document the events of the house in 2083, believing that he can expose the truth, and how the broken mirror reveals again secrets that no one should know. October 2083. Casa Beaumont, Montreal. The journalist Julien Mercier, 42, had built his career about impossible stories. Winner of the Pulitzer Prize for his investigation into the Roswell 2.0 case, he was known for disassembling urban myths with data and logic. But in the fall of 2083, Julien faced his greatest challenge, the legend of La Maison du Diable, an abandoned house that, according to the archives, had claimed at least one life every 30 years since 1895. Julien did not believe in ghosts. For him, the house was just a case of collective trauma and psychological manipulation, fed by exaggerated stories. But when he received an anonymous message with GPS coordinates and an encrypted phrase, the truth has a price. Prepared to pay it, he knew he had to investigate. He arrived alone, with a backpack, a recorder and an augmented reality chamber to document everything. He didn't tell anyone that he was going to the house that does not forget. When crossing the main door, Julien noticed changes since the last expedition in 2063. The roof was more deteriorated, but the broken mirror in the attic was still in its frame, shining with a sickly green light. On the walls, new inscriptions in ancient French. I never left. WHO are you? Come, look at the mirror. Julien recorded everything, narrating in a professional voice. Human psychology is vulnerable to suggestion. Registrations are probably the work of adolescents or fans of occultism. Nothing supernatural here. But when he reached the basement, he found something he could not explain. The circle of bones was intact, but there was a new skull in the center, with a Latin inscription. Alexander Vignault, 2063. Julian recognized him. He had investigated the case of missing adolescents in 2063, but the official records said Alex had fled from home. How was your skull there? The Jacques Moreau newspaper. In a basement of the basement, Julian found a rotten wooden box. Inside, the Jacques Moreau newspaper, the paranormal researcher who had documented the 1962 events. The pages were stained with water and blood, but Julian managed to decipher fragments. The house is not a place. It is a contract. The spirits are not dead. They are merged. The mirror is the key. The truth is the price. And final note caught your attention. If you read this, it's too late. The house chose you. Julian closed the newspaper, but not before seeing an image drawn on the last page. A figure with a camera, standing in front of the broken mirror. The mirror that should not exist. Determined to prove that everything was a fraud, Julian climbed into the attic and stood in front of the mirror. His reflection appeared, but it was not him. He was a blonde child with a fixed smile, the same face he had seen in Lucien Dufresne's photos. What the devil? He murmured. The mirror responded with a word, true. Suddenly, Julian saw visions. Victor Lucier strangling Marie-Eve with Lucien's eyes. Elise Moreau disappearing in the dark. Alex Vignault smiling in the shadows. A voice echoed in his mind. You are not the first. You will not be the last. The house is always hungry. Julian went back, but the mirror attracted him as a magnet. His body frozen, and felt a pain in his chest, as if he were taking his conscience. The entity responds. When Julian regained control, his voice was not his. Why did you come? To ask? To fear? To die? It was Marie's voice, mixed with others. Victor, Lucien, Elise, and something else. Julian, struggling to stay aware, activated his recorder. This is not a ghost. It is a psychic entity. A fusion of damaged souls. The house is his body. And I'm inside it. The voice changed, turning guttural. We are not ghosts. We are the house. And you are our new guest. The return of the mirror. Julian, desperate, took a piece of the broken mirror. When touching it, he saw visions. Victor and Marie talk fuses with Lucien's eyes. Leclerc performing the ritual, saying, they are not two. There are three. And the third is the master. The Beaumont breaking the mirror, but with an unknown figure smiling in the distance. The mirror was not the end. Julian shouted, yes, we divide. In you. In this house. In everything. Leclerc's voice echoed, you are not worthy. You come like others. To ask. To fear. To die. The battle by Julian. Julian tried to flee, but the house caught him. The walls closed, and the ground trembled. In the basement, the circle of bones shone, and the humanoid figures began to form. Tell me, Julian shouted, knowing he was losing control. His body arched back, and his voice changed. I am part of them now. The house is not a place. It's a promise. And I fulfilled it. Julian fell to the ground, unconscious. The truth that was left. A month later, Julian's body was never found. But on his computer, a last audio file was discovered. We failed to break the cycle. We just extended. The house continues to claim. And I feel his voice in my dreams. And in the broken mirror, if you look carefully, you can see a new figure in the shadows. Julian Mercier. Smiling. The last goodbye. Discover what happens when a descendant of Victor Lucier decides to face his legacy in 2113, believing that he can redeem his family, and how the broken mirror reveals again secrets that no one should know. October 2113. Casa Beaumont, Montreal. 118 years after the Beaumont flee from the house, the building was still standing, but now it was a monument at the time. The roof was completely collapsed, the walls bowed as if they were tired of sustaining themselves, and the mirror broken in the attic was just a memory of its ancient presence. But for Émile Lucier, a direct descendant of Victor Lucier, it was the only place where you could find answers. Émile, 35, was a forensic psychologist specialized in inherited traumas. As a child, he had suffered nightmares with a stone house, a blonde child smiling and a voice whispering, "You are not him, but you carry his blood." In 2112, after investigating his family tree, he discovered the connection with Victor Lucier and decided to face his family's legacy. He arrived alone, with an exploration drone, a magnetic field scanner and a recorder. He did not believe in ghosts, but in psychic energy, the idea that extreme traumas could leave traces in the environment, affecting those who came into contact with them. When crossing the main door, the frozen air hit him. The ground creaked under its boots, and the smell of moisture and iron was so intense that the throat irritated. In the main hall, he found graffiti of previous generations. I never left. WHO are you? Come, look at the mirror. Émile recorded everything, narrating in a professional voice. This is a classic case of collective trauma. Inscriptions are pure suggestion. The house is not a damn place. It is a psychic laboratory. But when he went up to the attic, he found the broken mirror. The fragments shone with a sickly green light, and in one of them, he saw his reflection, but it wasn't him. It was Victor Lucier, with Lucien's eyes. What the devil? He murmured. The mirror responded with a word. True. Victor Lucier's diary. In a basement room of the basement, Emile found a rusty metal box. Inside, the newspaper of Victor Lucier, written between 1947 and 1954. The pages were stained with dry blood, but legible. She didn't leave. He never left. He whispered. Ordens. He told me who killing, how to do it. I was just her tool. And final note caught your attention. If you read this, it's too late. The house chose you. Emile closed the newspaper, but not before seeing an image drawn on the last page. A figure with its name, standing in front of the broken mirror. The mirror that should not exist. Determined to prove that everything was a fraud, Emile stopped in front of the mirror. His reflection appeared, but it was not him. He was a blonde child with a fixed smile, the same face he had seen in Lucien Dufresne's photos. What the devil? He murmured. The mirror responded with a word. True. Suddenly, Emile saw visions. Victor Lucier strangling Marie-Eve with Lucien's eyes. Elise Moreau disappearing in the dark. Alex Vignault smiling in the shadows. Julien Mercier recording his last message. A voice echoed in his mind. You are not the first. You will not be the last. The house is always hungry. Emile backed away, but the mirror attracted him as a magnet. His body frozen, and felt a pain in his chest, as if he were taking his conscience. The entity responds. When Emile regained control, his voice was not his. Why did you come? To ask? To fear? To die? It was Marie's voice, mixed with others. Victor, Lucien, Elise, and something else. Emile, struggling to stay aware, activated his recorder. This is not a ghost. It is a psychic entity. A fusion of damaged souls. The house is his body. And I'm inside it. The voice changed, turning guttural. We are not ghosts. We are the house. And you are our new guest. The return of the mirror. Emile, desperate, took a piece of the broken mirror. When touching it, he saw visions. Victor and Marie talk fuses, with Lucien's eyes. Leclerc performing the ritual, saying, they are not two. There are three. And the third is the master. The Beaumont breaking the mirror, but with an unknown figure smiling in the distance. The mirror was not the end. Shouted Emile. Yes, we divide. In you. In this house. In everything. Leclerc's voice echoed. You are not worthy. You come like others. To ask. To fear. To die. The battle for Emile. Emile tried to flee, but the house caught him. The walls closed, and the ground trembled. In the basement, the circle of bones shone, and the humanoid figures began to form. Tell me. He shouted, knowing he was losing control. His body arched back, and his voice changed. I am part of them now. The house is not a place. It's a promise. And I fulfilled it. Emile fell to the ground, unconscious. The truth that was left. A month later, Emile's body was never found. But on his computer, a last audio file was discovered. We failed to break the cycle. We just extended. The house continues to claim. And I feel his voice in my dreams. And in the broken mirror, if you look carefully, you can see a new figure in the shadows. The darkness that remains. Discover what happens when a group of archaeologists decides to dig the foundations of the house in 2143, believing that they can find physical evidence of the entity, and how the broken mirror reveals again secrets that no one should know. October 2143. Casa Beaumont, Montreal. 140 years after the Beaumont flee from the house, the building was still standing, although now it was little more than a rotten stone and wood skeleton. The roof had completely collapsed, the windows were dark holes, and the broken mirror in the attic was just a lot of fragments covered with dust. But for Dr. Amara Patel, a leading archaeologist of the Casa del Diablo project, was a historical finding, the oldest structure of Montreal with records of continuous paranormal activity. Amara, 45, was an expert in missing civilizations and collective trauma sites. Next to his team, Dr. Elias Carter, historian, Dr. Lin Shu, geophysicist, and Sophia Morales, doctoral student, had obtained permission to dig the foundations of the house, believing that they could find physical evidence of the entity that inhabited it. We don't look for ghosts, Amara said to the press before starting. Let's look for answers, Elias added. But none knew that the house would not be expelled so easily. The excavation that should not be done. The equipment used land penetration scanners to map the foundations. The results were disturbing. Under the basement, there was a hidden camera, a rectangular structure that did not appear in the original plans. How didn't they find her before? Asked Sophia. Because she didn't want to be found, Amara replied. Be careful, they began to dig. On the third day, they found a sealed entrance with bricks and an oxidized metal plate with the registration, Hara Habitat Veritas. Hic nascitur tenebrae, here the truth lives. Darkness is born here. Lin, adjusting his sensors, he noticed something strange. The magnetic field here is anomalous. As if there were residual energy. Amara ignored it. We open this. The secret chamber. The door yielded with a dry crunch, revealing a stone staircase that descended towards darkness. The air was dense, with the smell of mold and iron. In the background, they found a circular room, with brick walls covered with symbols recorded with something that looked dry. In the center, a stone altar and a circle of human bones. But the most disturbing thing was what they found in a corner, a children's skeleton, sitting with a straight back, holding an obsidian amulet. Is it a child? Asked Sophia, in a trembling voice. No, Elias replied, checking the bones. It's Lucien Defresne, the Leclerc amulet. Obsidian amulet had symbols similar to broken mirror. Amara took it, ignoring Elias's warnings. It's just a ritualistic object. But when touching it, the amulet shone with a sickly green light. A voice echoed in Amara's mind. Why did you come? To ask? To fear? To die? Sophia, reviewing Lucien's skeleton, noticed something else. It has a fracture in the skull. But it doesn't seem natural. It is as if something had come out inside. Suddenly, the ground trembled. The entity awakens. The walls of the room began to vibrate, and the figures drawn in them moved. The shadows came alive, forming humanoid silhouettes that surrounded the team. They call, shouted Lin, but the door closed with a dry blow. Amara, still holding the amulet, saw visions. Victor Lucier strangling Marie-Eve with Lucien's eyes. Leclerc performing the ritual, saying, they are not two. There are three, and the third is the master. The Beaumont breaking the mirror, but with an unknown figure smiling in the distance. Leclerc's voice echoed, you are not worthy. You come like others. To ask. To fear. To die. The battle for Sophia. Sophia, terrified, approached Lucien's skeleton. When touching the bone of his hand, he felt intense pain and fell to his knees. His voice changed, with a multiple echo. Why do you come back? Didn't you learn? It was the voice of Marie-Eve Tremblay, mixed with others. Victor, Lucien, Elise Moreau, Julien Mercier and Émile Lucier. Sophia, wake up, Amara shouted, grabbing her arm. Quote, but Sophia pushed her with a superhuman force. We are not ghosts. We are the house. And you are our new guests. Lin, desperate, took the amulet and threw it against the altar. The impact caused an explosion of white light and the shadow figures disintegrated. The truth about the entity. The light revealed something that archaeologists did not expect, a stone door on the back wall, with a symbol of the eye they had seen on the roof. Elias, reviewing his notes, recalled something from Jacques Moreau's diary. Under the altar, there is a door. Do not open it. It is the heart of the house. It is where darkness is born. But Amara, impulsive, opened it. Behind, there was a small room, with brick walls and an intact mirror. On its surface, images of the past were reflected. Victor and Marie-Eve merged, Lucien smiling, Elise Moreau disappearing. And finally, Amara and her team, standing in front of the door. This is not real, Sophia murmured, with his normal voice. But the mirror replied, the truth has a price. Prepare to pay it. The final flight. The house began to collapse. The walls cracked, and the basement ceiling collapsed. The team ran towards the exit, but the underground passage closed behind them. Sophia, still affected by possession, took a piece of the broken mirror and threw it against the hidden door. The impact caused another explosion of light, and Leclerc's voice resonated for the last time. You will not escape. You will return. You all come back. The light disappeared, and the house was silent. The four survived, but none was the same. Sophia lost the ability to speak for weeks. Elias left archaeology and retired to a monastery. Lin published a book that nobody believed. And Amara returned to her university, but in her final notes she wrote, we failed to break the cycle. We just extend it. The house continues to claim. And I feel his voice in my dreams. A year later, Amara disappeared. His body was never found, but on his computer, a last audio file was discovered. I am part of them now. The house is not a place. It's a promise. And I fulfilled it. And in the broken mirror, if you look carefully, you can see a new figure in the shadows. The darkness that remains. The house on St. Alaminique Street is still standing, although nobody dwells it. Official records declare it in ruins, but satellite maps show that the roof has rebuilt alone. The walls, although cracked, seem to sustain themselves by an invisible force. In 2173, a group of teenagers will try to explore it, believing that it is only an urban myth. But the house is waiting for them. Because darkness never left. He only hid. End of the series. Stories of Ultratumba. Some houses are not homes. They are prisons. And some souls do not rest. They just expect.